Folks, welcome to an all-new episode of So Bad It's Good. This is your Tuesday episode. This is your pal Ryan. How is everybody doing? I hope it was a gentle re-entry to the week. It looks like a nice day outside here in Los Angeles from what I can see through the window, and I am stuck in here talking about Justin Baldoni and Blake Lively. By choice. I realize that is by choice, but it does feel like all your friends are outside playing and you've got to do homework and like school, you got to study for the big exam and just more information keeps like, you're like, oh God, how am I going to get through this textbook? And then another textbook like just drops and you're like, you're supposed to know all this material too. There are so many moving parts with the Baldoni Lively case. So we are going to get into it in just a second with what happened today in terms of the hearing about the gag order, the pretrial hearing, which we'll talk about, and then we'll dive into the website that Brian Friedman and Justin Baldoni and Wayfarer's attorneys made to present Justin's side of the case. And, you know, they, I think, are doing a somewhat brilliant job of putting out so much information that it has really swayed the public opinion from where we were on late December, you know, where we were right before the holidays when the New York Times article dropped and the Blake Lively complaint was put out there, which we read through. We had 3 episodes in late December where we went through each one of those documents, and it was very time consuming. I then got nasal sinus surgery and had to drop out of this story. And we did an episode last Tuesday with Lauren from Pop Apologists. And we talked about the Baldoni voicemail, and we played the audio from that. And now we'll get into actually Baldoni's side of this. And my God, there is so much information to go through. It is wild to have access to this much information. We talked about it with Sophie yesterday on the Pop Culture Roundup a little bit, and we talked about it more in a joking manner, even though we had strong opinions. Now we'll try to get into more of the meat and potatoes, but they're just to warn you. I think you already know this. And like I said on yesterday's episode, if this doesn't interest you, which I think some people, or maybe the majority of people, are so exhausted by this case already, and it does not go to trial until March of 2026. Now, in today's proceedings, the judge threatened to move up the court proceedings. And I'm like, yeah, do it. Make it next week. Let's get this thing over with. But yeah, they need a lot more time for discovery, even though I feel like at this point, what else is there to discover? I feel like I've read every text message. I mean, this is what I was begging Kyle, just like give us your phone so we can see the funny memes and texts that PK sends you. Like, I feel like we are seeing every email and text message that Justin Baldoni has ever had on his phone in regards to It Ends With Us. So such a wealth of information. So we're going to get into all of that, into the actual complaint itself. But there are so many moving pieces, and it just seems like more information comes out each day. I will try to just present it as it is here in the report. I'll also try to be somewhat fair, but as you all know, if you listen to this show, I am not a lawyer. These are my opinions if I express them. And remember, your opinions change. We talk so much about reality television on this show, and this case in some ways reminds me of a really gripping season of Vanderpump Rules, which is so sad to say because this is a very real life experience that happened. But it is something I say about reality television all the time is that you can really agree with a character on one of these shows so wholeheartedly one season, and then the next season you're like, oh my God, what was I thinking? This person made bad move after bad move. So your opinions change the more information comes out. And I do also want to warn as I go through certain text exchanges and emails, I personally am very aware that I think both sides seem very cringy in some of the back and forth. But I also try to point out every time I say that to me is the artistic process. Sometimes the artistic and the creative process when it comes to TV, movies, music, dance, all of these arts, there is a cringiness to it when somebody else reads somebody else's process. Because it's like you're putting on this school play and you're all excited and you're kissing each other's ass and da-da-da-da-da. And somewhere it went south with Baldoni and Lively. But I want to acknowledge that when you read these things, yeah, there's a bit of cringe. And kind of, I mean, not kind of, I think on both sides, but, that is us stepping outside of this. And when you're in that creative process, it's so exciting and you're taken away on this process. And you really do want to create something good. You want to create something that's going to stand the test of time, something that's going to be memorable. And obviously, with the subject matter of It Ends With Us being DV, I think Baldoni and Wayfarer went into this, the court documents try to explain, with really their eyes on that, and even wanting 1% of the money from this movie to go to a DV organization, which I think obviously is a noble cause. But it is funny. It's like you're reading somebody else's diary. Text exchanges when you're not a part of them, and that's kind of like in vogue in terms of our lives, ever since the iPhone, or even, it's now we're in screenshot culture. How many text exchanges or group text exchanges are you on with your friends where you've screenshotted somebody else's text exchange that you've had and shared it with a group of strangers so they can laugh and dunk on somebody else? It happens all the time. It's part of the culture. So we are now being welcomed into this backstage area that we weren't meant to be in. So that stuff you kind of have to take with a grain of salt as well. I mean, it's laughable in a sense, but I think it is so common in just terms of the creativity aspect of this, talking about how excited they are the movie and you're going to kill it. No, you're going to kill it. You're pumping each other up, giving each other hand jobs. It's like crazy. So that part, there is a sense of humor about it, but then it just obviously switched. And from these documents, it seems like fairly early on into the process, Lively really tried to exert power. I don't know if to take full control of the film, but it did seem like she really wanted to be a filmmaker at a certain point in this. And I'm trying to determine, and it's only guessing until they answer and double down with another complaint and more examples, which in today's proceedings, they are not threatening to, but they are saying that more information is being gathered and will be coming out. And I'm just still trying to, the motivation, I was talking with Sophie yesterday, is the motivation is, you want to be a filmmaker. You think that maybe Baldoni can be taken under very easy. You're more powerful than Baldoni. You see superstars around you like your husband, Ryan Reynolds, and your BFF, Taylor Swift, who are billionaire juggernauts. Why can't you have a piece of that? But that's all. I guess I'm just still so confused as to why Blake went down this path. Getting the New York Times involved and then filing the complaint, knowing that Baldoni and Wayfarer had so much information. And the obvious answer was like, well, egos, Hollywood egos. And maybe there is this element of her needing to go touch grass and is so insulated by celebrity culture that you think you can roll over somebody that is less powerful. It's still very confusing, and I will be very interested to hear more of Blake's team's filings and how much Ryan Reynolds will be involved in those, because it seems like he has been very involved thus far and was very involved in the process of the making of It Ends With Us, including the editing and then in the promotion of the film. There are just so many elements that are still so confusing to me, and I'm so curious how she will answer to this just napalm of information going everywhere. So we're going to cover that. Real quick, I do want to say two things that are not Baldoni related. First, I watched the season premiere of the new season of Summer House that airs next Wednesday. And you guys, it's fantastic. It is fantastic. Get excited. I'm happy to report that Summer House is alive and well, and I cannot wait for it to air so I can talk more about it. There are a couple of moments, one moment in particular that is going to knock you off your coal mining asses. Like, I was mouth agape, like holy moly. And I'm not going to even hint at it. Anyways, that's going to be out there. Second thing, I guess it is Baldoni related, is that I said earlier, this might not be your thing. So turn this off. There are plenty of other episodes of mine or other amazing podcasters talking about everything under the sun that is not Baldoni Lively. I'll try to commit to just doing one episode, something like this, a week if it's necessary. But I do want to tell more of Baldoni's side of this, just so it can be a companion piece to the Blake Lively episodes, okay? So today we had the gag order, the pretrial hearing, and this is taken from an article in the Hollywood Reporter by Caitlin Houston and Pamela McClintock, and the headline is, "This was not started by us," in quotes. The It Ends With Us battle hits the courtroom. This is bigger than the Grammys, folks. It hits the courtroom. Now, the U.S. District Judge Louis Lyman ordered the attorneys in the legal standoff between Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni on Monday to comply with a federal court rule barring lawyers from making statements to the press that could prejudice the case. This is geared towards both of them, but Brian Friedman, Baldoni's lawyer, has made so many public comments, has done interviews, Megyn Kelly, the whole deal. The guy is out and about. Obviously, the website got released this week, thelawsuitinfo.com. The only dumb thing about this website is that they should have made people pay to get access. This is like OnlyFans for like legal nerds. I mean, they put, and they threatened to make this website. Originally, when the original announcement was made about the website, they said there were going to be photos and videos, but this is just the amended complaint and the timeline of relevant events so far. But all told, that's like 350 pages of material. So the court issued the order after Brian Friedman claimed he was facing a potential gag order proposed by Lively's legal team. So Ryan Reynolds and Blake Lively filed, like they were really wanting to file this gag order to shut them up. And at this point, even if they had put in place the gag order today completely, there is already, I believe, just from a layman's perspective, so much damage done with all of the information that Friedman was able to get out in a couple weeks' time, that at this point, I mean, I'm sure it sounds like they even have more, but the gag order, I feel like the damage is so done. And I was talking to Rebecca last night and I said, listen, Blake Lively's career, even on the short end spectrum of things, is ruined for the next 3 years, right? I think that's conservative. And probably even longer than 3 years. But I was trying to be conservative. People love a comeback story. You never know. You can never count anybody out in this world, ever, in pop culture or in your lives. But then, on the other hand, she pointed out too, well, if Blake's papers were the only thing, or the documents were the only thing we read, Baldoni's career would have been over forever. And I was like, yeah, that's a great point. But also the fact that, I was like, oh, maybe he can direct some commercials down the line. It seems like, but both of them, she was trying to ruin Baldoni's career, and now Lively's career will be ruined. And I don't think, even no matter the outcome of this case, I believe it is truly a case that is a career ruiner. Definitely for Lively. And if anything, Baldoni is definitely winning in the court of public opinion at this point. But you do have to think about how this affects career, how this affects their careers, how this affects movie sets, TV sets, commercials. Usually, like I said, we are not this privy to this much information about the process of the making of these things. And that's the thing. You want to... You don't want audiences to think about how this was made. You want audiences to be wrapped up in a story. You want them to be taken away from our everyday lives and put into the story. You don't want to be thinking about like, oh, I wonder if she was livid at Baldoni that day. Like it takes you completely out of the movie. And that's why I've always argued, people are saying that a bargaining chip was potentially that Baldoni and Wayfair owned the sequel rights to Ends With Us. And I was like, yeah, but at this point, who cares about the sequel rights? Because who in their right mind would actually give it two rips about watching a sequel to this movie? We've got the sequel to this movie here in this case. It is all over. We have movie after movie, and trust me, there will be docuseries on this. There will be documentaries on this. This has given fodder for years to come for so many different elements of media. It's just not a direct sequel to It Ends With Us. So Michael Gottlieb is representing Blake Lively and said he was not seeking a full gag order, but rather a court order to comply with existing rules dictating trial publicity. As evidence of the need for the order, Gottlieb pointed to the statements of Brian Friedman had made in the press accusing Lively of a pattern of bullying and saying that he had the receipts that would prove the case in publications including People and on The Megyn Kelly Show. Gottlieb further pointed to a website recently launched by Friedman's team, which lays out the timeline of the dispute between Lively and Baldoni, but features an editorialized narrative, according to Gottlieb. Yeah, I mean, to that point, these are really like well placed. Like it's a real page turner. Like, honestly, it keeps you invested. I was like, man, this is a gripping timeline of events. It keeps you fully locked in, and you're like, oh, I'll just read another page. I'll just read another page. Like, this thing is, I mean, this is like the Da Vinci Code. You're just like burning through this thing. He further added that his team will move to dismiss the addition of that timeline and narrative to the amended complaint filled by Friedman. In turn, Friedman read out statements that Gottlieb's team had made to the press, though Lyman, the judge, cautioned, quote, "You went a bit further than that," even as Friedman said his team had to respond to the initial New York Times article about Lively's complaint. Friedman said, "This was not started by us." Friedman pointing out that obviously Lively started this with participating or potentially helping the New York Times article and then filing her complaint. The article continues, but he also agreed to follow court rules on engaging with press even before the court order. Lyman said he was adopting the rule as an order of the court, quote, with some reluctance, as he did not want the case to devolve into, quote, satellite litigation over statements made by the attorneys. If issues persist, he added that he could also move up the date of the trial so as not to prejudice potential jurors. But he was also reluctant to do that given the amount of discovery that needs to be completed before then. Quote, damage is done before a jury speaks, Friedman argued. Quote, that's the reason you each have sued, Lyman countered. This was the first court hearing on the lawsuits brought by Lively and Baldoni. The suits have been consolidated into one case, while the litigation between publicist Stephanie Jones and Jennifer Abel remains separate. So these lawsuits, so it's like it's putting the New York Times and the Blake Lively all together in one nice spiffy package. The March 2026 trial date still stands, even as both sides contend with discovery from multiple parties. Friedman recently filed a revised complaint which added the New York Times as a defendant. Gottlieb said his team was also thinking of amending their own complaint with new parties and claims, but didn't elaborate. This is what I was speaking to earlier, where Lively's team said, well, we have more too. He didn't go as far to say we'll have a website, but he said, we have more. Quote, I couldn't be more pleased with how the case was handled today, Brian Friedman said in a press conference outside the court hearing. Quote, we're going to move as quickly as possible and prove our innocence. Monday's late morning session in Lower Manhattan marked the first court hearing in the dramatic showdown. The hearing was originally scheduled for February 12th, but Lyman, the brother of veteran Hollywood director Doug Lyman, Doug Lyman, wow, he's a really good director, moved up the date after attorneys for Lively and Reynolds repeatedly raised concerns that the Los Angeles-based Friedman is potentially violating attorney conduct by litigating in the press. Now, this is interesting. So the judge's brother is Doug Lyman. So I would actually then, maybe I'll go and look on IMDb Pro if there are any conflicts of interest, if Doug Lyman has ever worked with Ryan Reynolds, Justin Baldoni, or Blake Lively in any one of his films. I mean, you know, I don't think it's probably no conflict there, but, you know, just in case. They moved up the date after attorneys for Lively and Reynolds repeatedly raised concerns that the Los Angeles-based Friedman is potentially violating attorney conduct by litigating in the press and tabloids in particular. Baldoni, Lively, and Reynolds were never expected to attend. Rather, a small army of lawyers representing the various sides turned up. A lot of money being spent right now, folks. In her lawsuit, which was filed over Christmas, Lively accused her, It Ends With Us director and co-star, of sexual harassment and launching a smear campaign against her in the wake of the movie's release as a means of deflection and retaliation. She also named Jamie Heath, Baldoni's partner at the production company Wayfarer Studios, Crisis PR exec Melissa Nathan, and Wayfarer publicist Jennifer Abel in the suit. The actress-producer is represented by Manat, Phelps, and Phillips, and Willie Farr and Gallagher. I don't know. I'm sure they do good work. Baldoni then responded, obviously, with his $400 million lawsuit against both Lively and Ryan Reynolds, alleging extortion and defamation. He also, extortion, he's claiming extortion, you guys. He also names Lively's longtime publicist, Leslie Sloan, and LA publicist, Stephanie Jones. He and Friedman are also going after the New York Times, which detailed Lively's allegations in the lengthy expose that dropped in December. The Lively-Baldoni feud has put a spotlight on, quote, astroturfing, whereby publicists harness the internet to sway opinion on social media. According to Lively's suit, the alleged organized attack against has had profound consequences by rendering her depressed and harming her family and business ventures. Quote, through this complaint, Miss Lively seeks to set the record straight, to hold the Wayfarer parties and associates accountable, and to shine a light on this new form of retaliation so that it will not be used against any others who seek to stand up and speak out against sexual harassment. In sum, Mr. Baldoni has crafted a public image of himself as not just an ally, but also a fierce advocate for women. Contrary to this image, as set forth in details above, Mr. Baldoni has spent the last several months and significant resources on his goal of wanting to bury and destroy Miss Lively for raising concerns about his and his CEO's harassing behavior and other disturbing conduct. Baldoni's side has insisted that his social media attack against Lively in favor of Baldoni is organic and that they did not engineer it. So remember, we went over this too, was that the publicists and the PR, the smear and all that, they kind of even were talking and they were like, wow, all these people are doing our work for us. Like they were maybe setting out to do something like that, but then the internet just kind of ran with it. The fire just like created this inferno that potentially they did not have to do much to get started. The article continues, the outspoken Friedman has repeatedly said his client is the true victim and that It Ends With Us was wrestled away from him by Lively in the post-production process because of the power she and Reynolds enjoy. This does not sound enjoyable. Instead of directly addressing Lively's complaint regarding Baldoni's behavior on the set of the film, Friedman has instead leaked texts, voice memos, and videos to the press to dispute her version of events as laid out in her suit, which alleges other women also felt uncomfortable. That is something that I'm still very curious about because in the initial pods we did and reading the complaints, there were other supposedly complaints against Baldoni and the production, like HR complaints. So I would imagine in more filings, we will find out more about those. In asking the court to intervene regarding Friedman, Lively's lawyers argued prior to the hearing that his various leaks and comments are likely designed to obscure that Miss Lively is in possession of numerous additional communications relating to her claims. Quote, if Mr. Friedman's conduct is permitted, it will only result in an arms race of selective public disclosures of text messages to the media that is neither encouraged nor permitted by Rule 3.6 or the federal rules. The Wayfarer parties initiated their own claims in multiple lawsuits against multiple parties, and in doing so had a full and unencumbered opportunity to include in their pleadings any and all text messages or other context they believe supported their claims, stated a January 27th letter asking for the gag order. Gottlieb and Ezra Hudson, attorneys for Lively, said in a statement following the hearing, we are pleased with the result of today's hearing and eager to move forward immediately with the discovery in this case. The court granted our request that all attorneys in the matter actually follow the rule of the law and not make any statements that could prejudice a jury. This case deals with serious allegations of sexual harassment and retaliation. We will hold the defendants accountable, and we are confident that once all the evidence is submitted in this matter, Miss Lively will prevail. So, if we were to take Lively's lawyers at their word, they are doubling down. They are fighting this. They are still saying the harassment claim is there. So we are in a full-blown war between these two entities, but it branches out to so many other different parties: Wayfarer Studios, Sony, Ryan Reynolds, Taylor Swift. I mean, we've got everybody. They also, as part of the trial today, they wanted a further protective order against other high-profile celebrities name mentioned. They did not mention Taylor Swift by name, but one could assume they are talking about Taylor. But I'm sure there are other big names involved in this, and they want to make sure their privacy is protected as well. And they were all in agreement on that, according to the Daily Mail article that I also read. So the gag order was not really, accepted, but the lawyers have agreed to these terms. Brian Friedman, though, he is, you gotta say he is very good at what he does, but he does it potentially in what could be viewed as an unorthodox way. But it is very effective, especially in the court of public opinion. So I would imagine that is making Lively and Ryan Reynolds very, I mean, I just wonder how clued in or dialed into all of this they are. Like, how, if they truly realize how much they are losing in the court of public opinion right now. But this is a long one. So I feel like this is the roller coaster. We're going to go up and down with both of these people as more information comes out. So that was today's proceedings. Now let's get into the lawsuitinfo.com, the website made with all of the information with Baldoni and his amended complaint and the timeline of events. Okay, on this website, let's start with the amended complaint. Let's see how far we can get into this. This is why I say these legal documents are very gripping. I've read a lot of legal documents since I've been doing this show, and this is one of the, I mean, this is just, like I keep saying, a page turner. It starts, general allegations. The following is not a story the Wayfarer parties ever wished to tell. Unfortunately, Blake Lively has unequivocally left them with no choice, not only to set the record straight in response to Lively's accusations and the New York Times Company's maliciously and recklessly propagated falsehoods, but also to put the spotlight on the parts of Hollywood that they have dedicated their careers to being the antithesis of. That task was always going to be an uphill battle. They never imagined they would encounter it to this degree. Had Lively chosen to merely ride out the self-inflicted press catastrophe, so right here, guys, it's saying self-inflicted is that her allegations of this smear campaign didn't exist. It was self-inflicted. This is all Blake Lively's doing, they're arguing. The public would likely have moved on and never known the truth about her. They would have never known that she deliberately and systematically robbed the Wayfarer parties, Justin Baldoni and Wayfarer Studios, of their movie. No one except the parties involved would have known that she used threats and extortion to relegate the colleagues she once highly praised to a basement to sit out their own premiere while she enjoyed the spotlight of a premiere and after party that was ultimately co-financed by both Wayfarer and Sony. She would have gotten away with these things and more because Baldoni, focused entirely on seeing the film succeed, would have held his tongue as he had through the year and a half that Lively tormented him, his family, and his partners. So this is interesting, and I guess if I was Lively's lawyers, I would say, you know, you have information of the hiring of the crisis PR team. So was this just a backup plan in case, or he got this feeling that Lively would retaliate because these people were hired before the release of the movie? And, you know, we have communication going back and forth between all of these parties, Baldoni and these crisis PR people, into the release of the movie. So was this just this backup plan? And she held her tongue and then finally unleashed her Khaleesi's in December through that New York Times article and the complaint. So in a sense, he must have suspected this, and I think you will see as we go through this that he definitely did and was very prepared for that as well. The document continues, but Lively could not tolerate her publicly tainted image for even a moment. And by the way, she's had a lot of publicly tainted, like, I mean, a lot of interviews through the years that Lively has not, like, you know, been, you know, the shining example of a PR actor selling their movie, but saying she could not accept that it was entirely her own making. She needed a scapegoat. And rather than admit and take accountability for her own mishaps, she chose to blame the Wayfarer parties in a malicious and unforgivably public manner. When she and Reynolds could not force Baldoni and Wayfarer to read a statement she and her representatives prepared, which we did read this statement on yesterday's episode with Sophie, I'm sure it'll come up again in this, extorting them to take accountability in defense of Lively's actions, so this is where the extortion element comes in, she lay in wait for months preparing to publicly attack Baldoni by falsely claiming that he had sexually harassed her. The same falsified story she had calculatingly devised and used throughout the production of this film in order to take control were now being used publicly to destroy Baldoni and the Wayfarer parties. Now, this is so dangerous to claim sexual harassment. And there is this part of me that wants to believe people mean what they say and are not trying to just purposely ruin anybody in this world, but that would be very naive of me. But I was also trying to think, and I still am, is there an element of this that she is believing her own bullshit? That she, not, I don't want to say her own bullshit, but she is believing this story. She is believing that she is sexually harassed, that she is that Ryan Reynolds believes she was sexually harassed, that Taylor Swift believes that she was sexually harassed. Is there a world in which she truly thinks this is the truth? And this is just a question I pose, but it did make me think about Taylor Swift in another way, because in 2017, I don't know if you'll remember this, Taylor Swift won an assault case against a radio DJ, and this was a really interesting case. This DJ, and there's a picture of this. She was on like I think a morning radio show, and they took a picture with the DJs afterwards, and you can see this man's hand, I guess, grabbing her butt. And, she said, hey, he assaulted her by grabbing her bottom beneath her skirt as the photo was taken. And a jury found this man guilty in Denver, Colorado. And the only thing she sued for was $1. It was just symbolic. She wanted $1 in damages. That's all she sought. But she wanted to make this clear that this is not right to do. You cannot assault me in any way. You cannot grab my ass when I am here to promote my music. It is disrespectful. It is all of these things. Now, the DJ, Mr. Mueller, had originally tried to sue the pop star Taylor Swift, saying that her claims had cost him his job because he was fired for this. But that lawsuit was thrown out by a judge. So the jury, said, hey, yeah, he is fully guilty of this. In a statement following the verdict, Ms. Swift said, I acknowledge the privilege that I benefit from in life, in society, and in my ability to shoulder the enormous cost of defending myself in a trial like this. My hope is to help those whose voices should also be heard. Therefore, I will be making donations in the near future to multiple organizations that help sexual assault victims defend themselves. This was during a stopover on the Red Tour while she was promoting that. So I thought that was very interesting, is that Taylor didn't feel, we have photographic evidence that she was done wrong. And she's like, listen, I'm paying out of my own money to sue this guy. This will not stand. This will not stand. And it represents everybody. It represents all women that have been harassed out there. And part of me is wondering if there have been any conversations, and if, Lively and Reynolds talk about how close they are with Taylor Swift in some of these leaked texts and emails and so on and so forth, is that I would imagine if they are to be believed, and who knows if they are to be believed at this point, there would have been a conversation with Taylor. And I would think that she does know the importance of these allegations and of them being correct. So is there a world in which Blake Lively truly feels this? Or is it just, we are going to bury Baldoni and we are going to take control of the movie? Now, I always say two things can be true at once. I always say, everybody wants black or white, but there's so many shades of gray. But I'm really trying to make sense of this, and especially when you pull Taylor into it. And I just kept thinking about that case. So I went back and looked at it, and, I just would think that Taylor would not support something. And this is neither here nor there, and this is not a story about Taylor Swift. But since she is being brought in, I would just hope that she would urge her friend to not make any kind of false moves, especially claiming sexual harassment, because how damaging a false accusation could potentially set the woman's movement back so many years, right? Are we all in agreement on that part, at least? Anyways, the complaint continues. Lively stole Wayfarer's movie, hijacked Wayfarer's premiere, destroyed the Wayfarer party's personal and professional reputations and livelihood, and aimed to drive the Wayfarer parties out of business entirely. It further appears that Lively worked for months with the equally powerful New York Times to prepare a false and damaging narrative to deploy against the Wayfarer parties. Not surprisingly, Lively prepared an administrative complaint with the Civil Rights Department in California, which is known as the CRD complaint, in an attempt to use the litigation privilege to shield her behind-the-scenes conspiracy with the New York Times. But upon information and belief, the CRD complaint was filed only after the Lively party spent months feeding falsehoods to the New York Times, intending that they may be disseminated to damage the Wayfarer parties. Lively delivered the CRD complaint to the Wayfarer parties over the Christmas holiday, and rather than promptly file a lawsuit, Lively, on information and belief, leaked the typically private CRD complaint to the public, utilizing the New York Times as a conduit for her revenge. Now, they will have to prove this in court, and, New York Times and their sourcing and things like that, I believe they are still, we'll check in a sec, standing by their article. Certain people on TikTok, I believe, I think it's Gooch is the account account have found the metadata on the photos used in this, and it was dating back to the end of October, which would then possibly mean that this was in the works for months. This wasn't just some fly-by-night operation by the New York Times. This was months of talking to these sources, mainly Blake Lively, or that's what they are propositioning here. It's a lot, you guys, but it does remind me, and since we talk so much about reality shows, it reminds me of so much of Housewives drama, in which, like, who leaked it to Page Six? Who leaked it? Who called Radar Online? Who did it? We know you did it. You leaked it yourself. So this will be interesting to see them prove this portion of it. And also, they are pointing out that this was a complaint, not a lawsuit filed by Blake, followed up then by the article. This CRD complaint, and upon information and belief, the false information delivered to the New York Times before the CRD complaint was filed, was rife with lies and doctored evidence. Lively then waited 11 days to file suit against the Wayfarer parties, in what seemed to be a desperate move after the public question. So this was 11 days after all of this. She then filed a lawsuit. Because they're saying that she did this because it was a desperation after the public questioned why she had never filed a civil lawsuit. Well, why did you just do the CRD complaint? Why didn't you file a civil lawsuit? So then she did, or that's what these documents want you to believe. On information and belief, Lively never intended to file a civil lawsuit, which would have triggered the Wayfarer party's rights to discovery, included obtaining evidence and deposing Lively under oath. Now, in the hearing today, they were trying to argue that Lively shouldn't be deposed, but Lively will have to be deposed. Potentially one of the greatest performances of her lifetime is yet to come. And I know we would probably all, just because we are so voracious in our appetite for mess, we would want this televised, but I don't think that was really great for the Depp Heard stuff, and I don't think it's great here. So I would argue against that, but I'm sure Baldoni's attorneys and Baldoni will argue for televised. But we'll see, right? We'll see. The damage to the Wayfarer parties was done by virtue of Lively's months of colluding with the New York Times on a false and malicious narrative, unshielded by any privilege. Make no mistake, these actions were deliberate. Do you ever wonder how it is with lawyers, you guys? Like, you know, or even thinking back to like famous cases and murder, like OJ. Like, was there any time that Johnny Cochran was like, OJ, come on, man, you did it, right? Like, we're going to try to get you off, but you did it, right? Like, is there any, like, how honest are you with your lawyers? I mean, is there like a wink? Is there a handshake? Is there like, you really got into it this time, but we'll get you out? Like, you know, both sides, both sides are just probably incredible lawyers, incredible in their craft. But it is this is my frustration with the legal system as a whole. It is just, it never seems to, like, how do you believe in justice when it really all depends on just amazing work by lawyers and trying to retract statements or get things thrown out that the jury can't hear? It sometimes feels very frustrating. And Baldoni, by the way, would be considered, or is considered, the underdog because he is not as famous as Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds. But remember that he does have a big backer in terms of the Wayfarer billionaire involved in this, that allegedly is funding this, right? You know, it's like Erica Jane has people funding her and her legal fights. Allegedly, Baldoni does as well with deep pockets over there at Wayfarer. But this is $400 million on the line, and that is not including damages, I believe. So heartbreakingly, a film that Baldoni envisioned years ago, remember, he is the one that found this project, got Colleen Hoover to agree to give him the rights, all that. So he championed this project. He wanted to honor the survivors of domestic violence by telling their story with the lofty goal of making a positive impact in the world, has now been overshadowed beyond recognition solely as a result of Lively's actions and cruelty. It says Lively wields immense power as one of the world's best known celebrities. No, I mean, she is very famous. But you know what I'm saying. It's produced and co-financed by Wayfarer and directed by Baldoni, who also portrayed the lead Ryle. She set out to, so it's more just setting out to destroy Wayfarer. And it then starts bringing up when Wayfarer parties refused to give way to Blake Lively's request. She did exactly that, accusing them of foul and reprehensible sexual misconduct. Wayfair was blindsided when Lively, upon the conclusion of the industry strikes, remember this coincided with the Writers Guild strike and the Screen Actors Guild strike, she refused to return to production absent the companies agreeing to her non-negotiable protections for return to production, which we talked about in the initial pods in December, which I think it was like a 17-point thing, including Justin Baldoni can no longer talk about communicating with Blake Lively's deceased father. This document continues that insinuated misconduct had occurred during filming, which, as evidence will establish, did not. So they are arguing that this was set up in an overall kind of like coup by Blake Lively. I will accuse this to get more power, right? I will accuse you of all of these heinous things to wrestle control of the film to get back on set, but you will have to agree to these 17 points, and some of those points included sexual harassment, pornography, very graphic things. But they're saying Wayfair was blindsided when Lively leveraged the document, essentially signed under duress to seize control of the film, ultimately getting her own cut of the film and a coveted PGA mark, which is the Producers Guild of America, and at her command, ousting Baldoni from all marketing and promotional efforts with many of the cast members and the author, all of whom he, until then, had long-standing positive relations with. Okay. So let's look at both sides of this really quickly. And I'm trying to figure this out myself, and I'm sure you already have it all figured out, but I don't. So let the dum-dum just talk this out with you guys. Okay. So Blake uses this 17-point thing to agree to come back to work. They say they signed this under duress, even though we'll find out later that Blake Lively never signed the contract to actually be in this movie, which I believe comes up later in these documents. But they signed this under duress. Now, I would imagine, I mean, this is how I would think just logically is, well, if you're Wayfair and Sony's involved, why agree? Like, I guess you could say the argument is, well, we're going to shut down hundreds of jobs on set, people wanting to come back to work after a strike. But at the same time, if Baldoni is fighting this passionately for his name right now in this moment, why did they not fight as passionately right then? So that is my devil's advocate, you guys. That is my thing. Like I said, I'm sure you guys will have tons of reasons why on your side. But that's the thing I'm thinking. Like, man, he is so good at fighting for his name and for his reputation in all of these documents. Why not fight it in that moment? Was it just so sprung upon at the last minute that they didn't have time to breathe and they felt they had to? Why are they so good right now, but so bad in that moment? That's a question I had. Now, ousting Baldoni from all marketing and promotional efforts, yes, that is heinous. That is horrible. You could also then devil's advocate that with, well, Blake Lively, I mean, is a bigger star than Justin Baldoni. Now, Justin Baldoni has a lot of name recognition, but back then he was a successful working actor, but he wasn't as famous as Blake Lively, right? So regardless, Blake Lively and maybe Jenny Slate, Hassan Minhaj, some of the other cast, they had more name recognition. So, you could argue, well, these are the names of the film. Baldoni, obviously playing also the aggressor in this film, also as the director. You could make an argument of maybe he wasn't needed, but it seems like an underhanded move on Lively's part in regards to the promotional efforts. Even though once Baldoni realized what was happening, he started his own press tour. He started doing his own screenings and really trying to highlight DV victims, right? Because remember, if you'll remember the initial pods I did, or I'm sure you've heard this already before, Sony in their marketing guide for this movie said, we do not want to focus on domestic violence when we promote this film. We want to say it's a champion of a woman's voice, not that domestic violence happens to 6 out of 10 women, or, you know what I'm saying? They didn't want to highlight that. They wanted to highlight that this was a story of triumph for women. And Baldoni saw that it wasn't working. Baldoni, very astute in how he reads social media. I think we can give him that as well, because you'll see in those back and forths with the PR people, he'll say, we'll need something like this, and pointed to a Twitter exchange that was very geared towards hate for Hailey Bieber, I believe. So he is very aware of how social media works. He is really boots on the ground. It seemed like he is very aware. So when he saw this, he said, you know what? It's not working. I will speak directly to domestic violence. Now, he does have a whole career of, I believe, very well-intentioned things supporting the rights of women. And, you can believe that, or you don't have to believe that. Like I said, some of the things that I've seen that he's done has been cringy, but maybe that's just cringy in retrospect because you're like, But at the time, it seemed like he was decently respected in that manner. The paperwork continues. Lively's exclusion of Baldoni from the promotion of the film backfired as she chose to callously promote her hair care and alcoholic beverage products rather than, that was tacky to promote. Like, you're not highlighting DV, but you're highlighting your alcoholic and hair care lines. But welcome to 2024 in the age of celebrity, where you can't just be a movie star anymore. You also have to have a skincare line, a makeup line, an alcohol brand. That is just 360 marketing now, but it does come off as cringy. When Lively faced significant public backlash from what was often referred to as her tone-deaf and insensitive press tour of the film, she doubled down on her false and misleading accusations against Baldoni. She seemed determined to make Baldoni the real-life villain. Her publicist, Leslie Sloan, went so far to propagate malicious stories portraying Baldoni as a sexual predator, a term Lively's husband, Ryan Reynolds, who I will herefor rename as Deadpool. No, I'll say Ryan Reynolds, also used to describe Baldoni when he called Baldoni's own agent. So they're saying Ryan Reynolds called Baldoni to Baldoni's agent a sexual predator. Now, in Hollywood, we've made that horrible joke before of like, hey, you're going to throw a rock in Hollywood, you're going to hit a sexual predator. Modern society justly reviles sexual harassers and abusers. Good. And Lively knew full well that making those allegations would be a career death sentence for the Wayfarer parties, especially given that Baldoni has lived his private and public life as an impassioned advocate for gender equality and healthy masculinity. Healthy masculinity. Ugh. She did not expect, however, that the Wayfarer parties would be able to meet those allegations with concrete documentary evidence disproving her claims and demonstrating that they, not Lively, were the targets of a calculated and vitriolic smear campaign. That evidence included, in part, herein is the basis for the Wayfarer party claims against the Lively parties for their extortion, defamation, and further wrongdoing. Now, here is where my brain just gets stuck. And I think I just have to accept, because they are saying, listen, this is completely false, Blake's narrative, and she is trying to destroy him. She knows she is in the wrong. She is trying to destroy him. And I think that's where I falter with this, because it is so hard for me to believe that people are just actually sometimes evil. Even though we have so many examples that sometimes people are just fucking evil. But it is still a hard thing for my brain to wrap around, because I'm like, why do you have to do this when you could have just kept your mouth shut and the movie was a hit and Blake would have been able to direct her own project next year? And, you could have just, why? Why do any of this? Why? And that's the thing that that's why I keep thinking like, yeah, let's fight it out in court. I want to figure this out. It continues. The film was the hotly anticipated adaptation of the best-selling book by Colleen Hoover. And she was starring as Lily Bloom, obviously. But she was not content merely to headline one of the year's biggest movies. Instead, apparently driven by overweening ambition and a need for control, Lively eventually leveraged her power as a wealthy celebrity to wrest the reins from a co-star and film's director, Baldoni, insisting on total control over every aspect of the film she could get her hands on, from wardrobe, which we saw how that turned out, to marketing strategy, to music, hello Taylor Swift, even creating her own cut of the film. Not only did Lively's power play cost numerous people their jobs, but at every turn her wrong-headed creative decisions reflected her fundamental lack of understanding of the book the film was based on. This came as no surprise to her worried colleagues, given that even well into production, Lively had not even read the book. Now, here is something I'm going to throw out. What if Baldoni's illiterate? I'm sorry, what if Lively's illiterate? What if Lively can't read? What if this is how we find out that Lively she has never learned the abyss. She's grew up on movie sets and has never learned how to read. No, obviously not. Now, okay, coming from an actor side of things, you could make the argument of she already had a good sense of this character and didn't want to be bogged down by the details of the book to interpret the character how she saw it. But that, of course, I know as I say it, is a flimsy excuse. Most actors are going to dive into the source material and just, take a big old highlighter and highlight the shit out of that book and go, okay, this feeds into that and this feeds into that. But also they can make the argument of this also shows the ego of Blake Lively. This is a text message from September 14th, 2023, a text from Justin Baldoni to Jamie Heath, his best friend and producer on the movie. It says, after rereading the book, which had 150 pages to build their relationship, we have combined scenes to heighten the stakes for Ryle in pursuit of Lily, utilizing humor and his desire to sleep with her. While I understand Blake's reasons for not wanting to read the book does a very good job in getting in Lily's mind during her interactions with Ryle and setting up the why behind her attraction to him, which ultimately helps us understand why she stays in the end. So what this leaves out right here is what are Blake's reasons that she gave Baldoni, but it does put this out there. It's another ding against Lively and her reputation. Lively's disastrous marketing efforts and tone-deaf press interviews and appearances backfired and led to widespread criticism of Lively's promotional approach to the film's highly sensitive focus on domestic violence. Past videos of Lively resurfaced online, videos that appeared to solidify public perception that Lively was an insensitive, mean girl who cared more about peddling her products than acknowledging the domestic violence survivors. This also has footnotes in it as well. In an early meeting with Baldoni, Lively foreshadowed what was to come, stating, quote, "I'm afraid you have too much power," referencing Baldoni's dual role as producer and director. This statement made an early impact on Baldoni, who felt compelled to reassure her the relationship would be collaborative and went above and beyond to make it so. This was not an invitation to sideline him and his producing partners. Lively later claimed she read the book, but text evidence shows that well into production she had not, and in fact expressed she had chosen not to read the book. She even tried to Google the color of her character's hair rather than pick up the book. Oh my God, we've got her Google search? Oh no! Holy shit! Oh no! Ah, that's so... Ugh. Anywho, it is not uncommon for actors, if they, get lucky enough to be able to direct themselves in their own film. Ben Affleck, who we talk about a lot on this show, he's directed himself multiple times in films. The Town he directed, which Blake Lively was in. That's one of those things. Edward Norton has directed himself in Motherless Brooklyn. I mean, the beginning of Charlie Chaplin used to direct himself back in the silent pictures. So there are so many examples of this happening. I do find it interesting. And I do want to point out that Colleen Hoover, I think, was one of the people that suggested Baldoni as Ryle. And I'm sure, I think Baldoni obviously is a very confident man, but I am sure that probably plagued him as well, because that is a lot to take on, especially on a big project like this with not a lot of directing work under your belt at this level. And especially when you're having to deal with a troubling co-star with many demands. It is troubling. It is something that is being used against him in these things. It's a really hard gig because directing is a hard gig. And the other thing in terms of the cuts of the film, Lively had her cut, Baldoni had his cut, really wild for the star of the film to have their own cut. But different cuts of the film happen a lot of the times, I will say, I was trying to think of examples. Usually it's between the studio and the director. Zack Snyder, he is a big budget movie director. He was in charge of the DC comic book properties for a time. And he had done Batman versus Superman, and then he went on to direct the Justice League movie. And the Justice League movie was plagued, or Warner Brothers felt that it was just plagued with all this just horrible things happening. It wasn't going the way they wanted. And there was a devastating event that happened in Zack Snyder's life. He had to step away a little bit from production, but they also realized, Warner Brothers, that they weren't happy with the product. And then they brought in, what's his name? The Buffy the Vampire Slayer guy, that directed the Avengers film. He, I think, got Me Too'd. The Avengers director. Sorry, as you get older, your mind doesn't work as well. Joss Whedon. Joss Whedon took over for the Justice League movie and finished it. And that Justice League movie, even with Joss Whedon, it was a big pile of crap. They went on to release the Zack Snyder cut on Max during the pandemic. And it went from this 2-hour or less movie to a 4-hour epic. And it was actually a lot better. Still not one of my favorites, but a lot better than got released out there. But Warner, that's why online you would always see release the Snyder cut, release the Snyder cut. So these things happen, these creative processes. Remember, at the end of the day, they want to make money. Helping domestic violence survivors and people, this inspiration is amazing. But at the end of the day, unfortunately, I always try to remind people, even if you're watching Bravo, there's a company behind Bravo. And guess what? They want to make a lot of money. They have shareholders. They have investors. They need to make money. And if you are not making money, you are not helping their stock price. So all of this is good and well for helping people, but remember, television was created to sell soap. Movies are there to make money for the studios and to sell popcorn and sodas and all that good stuff for the exhibitors that show these films, right? That's a big part of it. So a lot of people there's a lot of hands in this. There's a lot of people trying to be the leader of these things. And I feel like, it seems like Baldoni was definitely taken in and was trying to be so nice guy about it that he got way too just ran over, right? Anyways, social media commenters quickly pointed out that her tie-in of her alcohol beverages was in particularly poor taste, given the World Health Organization estimates. Well, we don't listen to the World Health Organization as of last week, I guess, but they estimate that 55% of domestic violence incidents are linked to alcohol. Man, this fucking amended complaint throws that in here. Unbelievably, Lively made this harmful and irresponsible message worse by naming a drink at her premiere party, Rile You Wait. Okay, I told you, there's a lot of cringy things. Now, I'm not defending Blake Lively, but I do not think Blake Lively was in charge of her themed drinks at the premiere. Unfortunately, other people are involved. They're called party planners. Lisa Barlow says she's like the queen of Sundance party planning, right? I would love to believe that Blake Lively would realize that this is so ridiculous, and whoever did create this, holy shit. It's like you're tired at the end of the night and you're like, fuck it, Rile You Wait. Okay, perfect, without knowing the source material. If we can tie this directly to Blake Lively signing off on this, then that's wild. But I tend to believe that other people were in charge of that, but it's a great thing to throw in here to just show how disconnected that she possibly was. Sadly, this backlash could have been avoided had she not refused to meet with the film's domestic violence partner organization, nomore.org, as Baldoni had offered. Even a brief visit to their website or a simple online search would have readily uncovered this and other information on the topic of domestic violence. So this is another thing, saying she wouldn't go to even this website. This was our partner organization on this film. Meanwhile, Baldoni, whom Lively herself had ensured was excluded from participating in her marketing efforts, was safeguarded from this backlash as he focused on amplifying the voices of those affected by domestic violence, as originally intended when he reached out to author Colleen Hoover 5 years earlier, as documented by his partnership with nomore.org dating back to 2022. Lively, enraged that her plans were foiled and armed with proof of alleged sexual harassment in the form of a 17-point list of demands she had required the Wayfarer parties to sign just months earlier, focused her rage on Baldoni, blaming him for the consequences of her own missteps. So this is painting that she was enraged by all of this, that all of this bad press was you could just center it right on Baldoni. Meanwhile, Stephanie Jones, founder of Jones Work LLC, was Wayfarer and Baldoni's PR firm, was embroiled in a personal and professional crisis. Her increasingly erratic behavior had driven away not only high-profile clients, but also her right-hand woman, Jennifer Abel, who oversaw the Jones Work Los Angeles office. Now, this brings into the PR aspect of it that was very heavily featured in Blake Lively's complaint. This is bringing the PR element of this into the paperwork. After a final outburst against Wayfarer in which she outright refused to comply with their direct instructions, Wayfarer had no choice but to cut ties with Stephanie Jones and Jones Work rather than leave their public image in the hands of what appeared to be an out-of-control Jones whose actions were not aligned with Wayfarer and Baldoni's worldview and wishes. Jones was filled with impotent rage at Wayfarer and at Abel, who a month before had announced her decision to leave Jones Work to form her own company. Jones saw an opportunity for revenge, and she took it. On information and belief, Jones, Lively, Reynolds, and Leslie Sloan, Lively's publicists, and others concocted a plan whereby Jones would seize Abel's phone upon her departure and mine it for messages that, stripped of context, could be used to concoct a false narrative that the disastrous press coverage of Lively's callous and opportunistic comments and the public reaction to those comments were not Lively's fault at all, but the result of a calculated, though in reality non-existent, smear campaign by Baldoni and his team. So remember, this is part of Lively's complaint that we had went over because they had all of this information. They had all these text messages. So first off, Baldoni's people are arguing this is without context. They left out all of these contextual things, in messages. They cut out emojis in these messages, all of that stuff. But I will say, I believe this was company phones, company computers, where unfortunately your employer is allowed to do these things. But they are saying this is part of an overall plan to get revenge. That's what they are alleging here. And they are trying to make it look like a smear campaign when it was not. This is a little murky, though, because it also takes you behind the scenes of PR things. And if you want to just believe that PR is there just to be nice and, promote things, then go for it. But you have to also just accept that there are people that will bury you. In fact, that's a text exchange in the original complaint of, Baldoni wants to say that we can bury her. We can't say that, even though kind of we can. Like there were comments in there like that, obviously taken out of context, but they do know how to plant PR people at the top know how to plant stories. That's how this has worked all the way back into the early days. I mean, think about I'm trying to think, the dime store rags and the, people trying to out Rock Hudson as a homosexual back in the day. I mean, these things were out there. Tabloid stuff and people just relationships and getting pieces of information and floating an idea and seeing if it catches fire. That's why I believe Lively's complaint was so believable, because I've been aware of situations like this for decades upon decades. These things actually do happen. Okay, so Lively claimed that Baldoni was the one smearing her. The reality is that it was Lively and her team who carefully planned and implemented a vile smear campaign. So they're saying it was actually Lively who created the smear campaign by saying that she was the victim of a smear campaign. It was inception, just smear campaign on top of smear campaign. So Leslie Sloan of Vision PR was all too willing to carry out this strategy, especially once armed with ammunition by Jones, who was bent on revenge against her ex-employee and former client. So if you're seeing these text exchanges or even seeing these cherry-picked exchanges, and this person had worked for you and this person quit, you really are, guess what? Employees that are leaving the company, quitting, you do not sometimes have a good relationship with your boss and vice versa. So there are bad feelings out there. Just think about jobs that you have been let go from or you have quit. Has it always just been amazing, good luck out there? No, a lot of the times it is not. But also, if you are Leslie Sloan and you are reading these text exchanges, wouldn't you be more willing to believe that this was a smear campaign against Lively? Just a question I pose. Shortly after the film's premiere, the public backlash against Lively with husband Ryan Reynolds demanded through their talent agency, which also represented Wayfair and Baldoni, that the Wayfair parties publicly apologize for so-called mistakes during production in order to deflect the avalanche of negative media coverage of Lively. So I believe this is where the drafted statement that Reynolds and Lively drafted, which is just so bonkers to me, demanding that they issue this statement apologizing and fall on the sword to save Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds at the same time. This is WNME, the agency, which is very powerful. And if they didn't, the quote is, the gloves would come off. Multiple WME executives acknowledged that in their experience, Lively and Reynolds' threats were not to be taken lightly, though admitting to false, vague, and unspecified mistakes would be tantamount to admitting to career-ending misconduct. Yes. So if this statement got released under Baldoni and Wayfair's name, you're saying hey, we suck at what we do. Sorry, enjoy the film. That would be wild, right? So they took a stand knowing full well that Lively and Reynolds would bring the full might of their celebrity artillery against them, and that is precisely what happened. Lively, working with her husband and publicist Jones, among others, set out on a campaign to tar and feather. The wording in I love their wording. A lot of them are just so not, but the wording in these documents, hats off. They advanced a fabricated narrative in the press that Wayfair parties had sexually harassed Lively, then embarked on a calculated and malicious smear campaign to ruin her reputation. The Lively parties laid their trap carefully over a period of months before springing it all at once on the eve of the winter holidays. I like that. The eve of the winter holidays. Just as plainly, they knew full well that their claims were entirely baseless because their own wrongfully obtained evidence proved that neither the alleged sexual harassment nor the accompanying smear campaign against Lively ever existed. I said this at the time when this got released. Man, how... some people were arguing that Lively actually did Baldoni a favor, that a lot of people, that Hollywood was closed down, so almost did him a favor to release it at the holidays. But in my thinking, I thought it was worse releasing it around the holidays because, my God, You want to spend the holidays with your family and your friends and hopefully getting some nice gifts from Santa. And all of a sudden you've got this complaint against you that you are harassing somebody sexually. To me, that would be devastating. That would be devastating to have to fight rumors and nastiness, as Meredith Marks would say. But some people argued that it was doing a favor to Baldoni, because if this was released before the holidays, when Hollywood was in full swing, that it could be even more damaging. I do not believe that to be true. Lively moved forward with her plan with ruthless precision, doubling down in the face of abundant evidence, casting doubt on the veracity of her story. Lively even went so far as to serve her lawsuit on the Los Angeles-based defendants as they evacuated their homes in the midst of devastating fires engulfing their city. On a day when the Wayfarer parties were gathering their kids and pets, preparing go bags, and monitoring evacuation orders while fearing for their homes, Lively, from the safety of her penthouse in New York — I love that they threw the penthouse line in there — deployed process servers in the midst of these troubling times. Oh my God, we needed a documentary just for that. You're telling me process servers were battling flames? Like, I need to throw this document at you. You've been served. Like, that sounds wild. I want to know how truthful that statement is. Like, we need to depose those servers. My goodness. This is not a case about celebrities sniping at each other in the press. This is a case about two of the most powerful stars in the world deploying their enormous power to steal an entire film right out of the hands of its director and production studio. And it's not that good of a film. Then when Lively and Reynolds' efforts failed to win them the acclaim they believed they so richly deserved, they turned their fury on their chosen scapegoat, tolerating a year and a half of their behavior while remaining polite and professional at every turn, offered Baldoni and... Oh, they misspelled Baldoni here. Caught you, Brian Friedman. You said Baldoni. Who's Baldoni? Jeez, you guys. Baldoni. You're a Baldoni. And every turn offered Baldoni and Wayfarer no protection. God, that's what's wild too. I caught mistakes in the Lively documents as well. And you're just like, it always makes you laugh because you're like, I'm a normie reading these documents and I'm like, wait a sec, you're probably getting paid like thousands of dollars an hour and I just caught a spelling mistake. That's wild. It's like when you read the Daily Mail and you find so many spelling mistakes and you're like, what the fuck is going on over there, Daily Mail? By bringing this complaint, the Wayfarer parties commit themselves to seeking and proving the facts, based not on insinuations built from selectively edited and context-free text snippets, but by putting all the evidence before the court and the public. When the Wayfarer parties have their day in court, the jury will recognize that even the most powerful celebrity cannot bend the truth to her will. So they take us back to when Baldoni and Wayfarer purchased the rights to It Ends With Us. Baldoni, whose film career was dedicated to producing and directing meaningful films to have a positive impact on the world. This is what I got to say too, is I keep thinking about, if truly that is Justin Baldoni's want in life with his career, is to make a positive impact in the world, even if this all turns out to be true in terms of what Blake Lively did to Baldoni, it's got to at the same time kill him, because now there is just so much negativity surrounding this. The domestic violence conversation is so thrown out the window at this point. And the stink of this, if they're able to prove this against Blake Lively, Baldoni will be able to have a career, but this will be such a huge footnote of his career. And I would imagine if you really are wanting to champion these women's issues, you also have to realize at the same time, there's so much negativity at this point involved. Even if Baldoni proves to be 100% correct in these allegations, it's got to kill him, because at the same time, then it paints Lively as somebody who falsely accused, which really does set certain parts of the women's movement back, and maybe I'm thinking about it too deeply, but I don't know. I just keep thinking about that. Anyways, it talks about things that he's done in the past. I did a project about cystic fibrosis. It talked about developing a friendship with Claire, who he documented her plight, and he promised he would tell her story. And he did that in the film he directed about her, about this story, I guess. Baldoni's more recent film was the Wayfarer film Clouds, a true story about a teenager with cancer, Zach Sobiek, who finds joyful purpose and inspiration in music. So he has directed certain films, or maybe short films, with the positive message of these people that had these issues. In pursuit of that same vision, in 2019, they acquired the rights to It Ends With Us, the novel published in 2016. Though positioned as a romance novel, the book explores domestic violence and generational patterns of abuse, and these messages resonated deeply with readers and drew a passionate fan base. In 2021, the novel exploded in popularity thanks to the social media phenomenon BookTok. Many fans expressed how important the book was to them as survivors of domestic violence and intimate partner abuse. I mean, that's one of the best things about social media is that, you can be on the gossipy side of TikTok or social media, but then also I'm on BookTok. Like I get so many books recommended to me through TikTok. It is so helpful to be, by the way, even people have talked about this podcast on TikTok, and it's helped me get new listeners. It is such a powerful tool. And I do want to always point out is that, man, it is so much more fun for me to talk about something that I dearly love. Like I was talking yesterday, like, oh man, I just wish I could talk for hours about the new show Severance on the second season, or how great Salt Lake City is. Like, I love talking about that because it fills me up. It makes me so happy. And I'm like, oh, everybody's got to watch it. And do you see what I see? And how funny is this? Or how cool is this? And those are so much more fun for me to talk about and hopefully for you to listen. But at the same time, I'm also a realist in the sense that this kind of story is what really drives people, like the mess, the muck, the mire. And sometimes that saddens me, but I think that's just me getting older. Is that like, man, shouldn't we be spending our time about just things that we passionately love? Or if you're to take Justin Baldoni's side, he seems to truly love to tell these stories that are going to be some sort of help or positive impact in the world, right? But now we're stuck reading a 200-page court document. When It Ends With Us, Colleen Hoover the author watched his film 5 Feet Apart in theaters. She told Baldoni, "You are the right person to make this movie." Baldoni's early emails to Hoover demonstrate his commitment to doing so in the manner he envisioned would be most impactful. In fact, it was Hoover who suggested Baldoni play the role of Ryle. And they have the email from Justin to Colleen Hoover, February 1st, 2019, saying, pleasure to meet you, gives a quick backstory. Talks about building and funding his company. And, this is him asking if she would like to see a screening of 5 Feet Apart. And also saying, just wanted to say of the reviews I read for this book, this one stood out to me and makes me so excited to potentially work with you. Your fans love you. What a gift you have. And it just talks this quote about what strength the character Lily has, being real and vulnerable. It was a very nice email to Colleen Hoover. There's also an email, April 11th, 2019, Justin to Colleen, saying he is coming up from shooting Jane the Virgin, which he was one of the actors in. And they were about to film the final episode. And he says, I haven't been able to get to It Ends With Us off my mind. Such an important story. So damn romantic and beautiful and tragic and hopeful. I always say that both in art and life, all the best stories are always two things at once. And this is so much what your book is. Joy and pain, love and sorrow. You did such a beautiful job of covering incredibly difficult subject matter and playing it out in a realistic and unforgettable way. But what I love the most is the opportunity to let so many women feel seen on the screen via this particular story. I can't even imagine how many women there are who are stuck in a relationship like this, and via this story could find the strength to create a better life for themselves and for their children. There are so many opportunities to partner with organizations and create impact with a story like this. I love that you held nothing back from the pain of Lily and Ryle's past. I love that he meant to say, I love that there really are no, but he said, I love that they really are no bad guys and that we are he meant to say sums, but it says sons of our experiences and our trauma. I love the opportunity for narration and the stunning and gorgeous impact of the title payoff at the end. These are the kind of stories that change and saves lives. And I believe this story in particular can continue to have a huge impact on the world. If you will have me, I would love to option it from you. On a separate note, the screenplay for 5 Feet Apart was adapted into a novel and has been on the New York Times bestseller list since before the release of the movie last month. I know you have your charity, and I would be happy to donate some signed copies for the bookworm box. So this is him, trying to say, hey, I want the rights to this movie, right? And also, it's very Baldoni-esque, right? We read all these text exchanges between Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni, and it seems like he approaches all of this very, and I do this a little bit too, just very sentimental, and everything's powerful, seems very excited, very engaged. You might hear this and go, oh my God, dude. It seems like this is how he operates. Now, this is an email from Colleen to Justin on April 11th. and is just saying, hey, I'm going to be upfront with you about a couple things so you can decide if you want to move forward. I've sold several film options, and that's, usually selling to a production company the project that you worked on or wrote, and they're going to option it to make a movie and try to sell it to a studio unless the studio buys it outright. And so it's like this weird dance of trying to get your project to get filmed. She says, I realize not all of them get made, and I'm okay with that. One of the film options was not a great experience. The producer started a fundraising campaign for the film without my knowledge or permission, and it ended up taking over $100,000 from my readers. The film was never made, my option was never paid, and the option is her fee, obviously. And I ended up pulling the plug on the project, and the producers never refunded readers their money. And this is where you also got to look at Colleen Hoover's this, because people are really wanting to make Colleen Hoover a bad guy in this as well. And you've got to also say, like, Colleen has also now dealt with the movie industry before this film was a hit. She's had these experiences that never came to fruition, that she got screwed out of, that have screwed over her readers. So she's real tentative and hesitant. And I imagine this experience has just had to have knocked her over, right? She says, I felt terrible that my readers were the ones punished, so I mailed out $15,000 worth of free products to those who donated to their campaign. I want to be positive that crowdsourcing is not something that will be done when it comes to this film. It's important to me that a funding plan is in place that won't affect the supporters of this book, right? She doesn't want to be that influencer that's like, send me overseas. I want a vacation, get yourself there. She's saying, I want this to be a real thing where my readers aren't funding this film. She said, I had a good experience about this other project, but she says, it ends with us is important to me, though. I would love more involvement on this film. I've actually been working on a script for it already, along with a producer friend of mine who lives in LA. Her name is, and this is redacted, and she is a very dear friend of mine and is a huge fan and supporter of this book. We sat down for a week and outlined it last month, but I had to put it on pause on it because I'm on deadline for this book I'm writing. We planned on picking it back up in 2 weeks and diving into it. Even though I'm the author, I believe I've been able to separate myself enough from the format of the book to know what would make the best setup for the film. While I do want to please the readers who have read the book, I understand the need to make a film that will equally touch those who haven't read the book. Are you based out of Los Angeles? Maybe we can meet and have a chat about our vision for the film to make sure we're on the same page. I'm based out of Texas, but am in LA a lot. Other than ensuring my readers won't be asked to donate to the fundraising for a film and hoping to have more involvement in the process when it comes to the script and production, I don't really have any other requests. I realize your experience with film far outweighs mine, and based on the magnificent adaptation you did of 5 Feet Apart, I'm confident you could do the book justice and that our visions will align. I watched the film 2 nights ago and immediately started the book yesterday. Sometimes I like to do it backwards. I think you did a wonderful job, and even though I'm not finished with the book yet, I feel like the essence of it was captured beautifully through film. I wrote a book where one of the characters suffers from CF, so I've done a lot of research on the subject and thought Rachel and you did such an amazing portrayal of what carriers of cystic fibrosis go through. Anyway, so she kind of rambles a little bit about that and talks about the first donation through the Bookworm Box to the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation. And it's a very positive email that kind of ends with, I feel good about this. I feel good about you. I've seen your past work, your passion, and your love for humanity, and honestly feel there's no one better for the project. Before I direct you to my agent, I just want to get your thoughts on the above. Thanks so much, Justin. I hope you and the family were able to get some vacation time in. However this works out, I would love books for the bookstore. In fact, we just started a young audience box and would love to feature 5 Feet Apart in the subscription box if there's a way we can buy a few hundred copies at cost. Everyone needs this book in their possession. So very positive. And then on April 12th, she says, have you given any thought to whether you would want an acting role in this? Say maybe Ryle. I could see it. So this is from Colleen to Justin. So Justin, coming off of Jane the Virgin, the TV show, has got to be shitting a solid brick because he's like, holy shit, I got this book's a success. I've made contact with the author. She likes my previous work. I could be attached to this. I could also, she suggested I acted in it. So this, as somebody in the performing arts, has got to be a dream email to get, right? A hot property that Hollywood wants. Wow, that's got to be huge. It's got to be a great day to get that email. Soon after, Wayfair partnered with Sony to co-finance and distribute the film. Their agreement included, at Wayfair and Baldoni's insistence, that the provision was a deal breaker or requirement that 1% of the film's proceeds be donated in support of survivors and domestic abuse. That was earmarked for the organization No More, with which Baldoni had sought to partner with as early as September 2022. Was that net or gross 1% of? Anyways, they don't say. They just say there was immense responsibility that they felt, and they wanted to really let audiences see this and that they could survive these situations. In casting Blake Lively, a world-renowned actor with talent and charisma in the leading role, they entrusted her with that vision to bring Lily to life. Although Wayfair learned that Lively had a reputation for being difficult to work with, Baldoni at that time was not dissuaded and found her to be genuine. I do wonder about their earlier conversations before she was hired. And I do also wonder in the process of discovery, will these reputational things that they speak of be included, right? During pre-production, Baldoni and Lively begin a promising and close collaboration, which is the next section of this document. Okay, so around, let's see, December 31st, 2022, Lively agreed to take the lead role. As part of the negotiations, Lively was granted an executive producer credit, which is usually given to, they say given to talent of her stature. Lively had originally requested a producer credit, but they said no to that as that would not reflect her role. The producers on a film are more hands-on, whereas the executive producers are more, just over the whole production. Like take a show like The Simpsons. If you look at The Simpsons in its like 50th season now, they have like 8 billion executive producers because they just keep adding people through the years. But the producers are the ones that are really like getting their hands dirty day to day. And that's what she had requested, but she was not granted that. Wayfair did not request nor require that Lively contribute to the film in any capacity but beyond her roles as actor and executive producer. But I do think there's a little wiggle room there in seeing the text messages and exchanges between Lively and Baldoni that Baldoni did seem to encourage as much collaboration as possible. So in the beginning, they says it was positive, collaborative, creative partnership. They worked closely in the early days of the film, trading ideas. The working relationship grew close. Baldoni and Lively shared stories and pictures from their lives, commiserated over family illnesses, and exchanged jokes and memes. Memes and texts, as PK would share with Coyle. Baldoni offered concern and support when Lively faced family health concerns. They texted almost daily, and a friendly banter established a comfortable dynamic that under typical circumstances would have made working together easy. So how did this all go wrong? Lively even felt comfortable enough to make silly jokes, redirecting a sweet compliment Baldoni gave. And there is an example of this, well, there is the text exchange in here, even though the timeline of events gives us way more texts and emails, it's peppered through the amended complaint as well. This is a text from Blake Lively saying, I feel the same. It's such a good feeling to get work done that we're proud of and to do it together. It just clicks when we find it. And that's just rewarding as filming it or editing it or marketing it or releasing it. This is all storytelling. This is why we do it. But even in this text, Blake is like, it's all consuming. It's not just the filming of it. It's after the editing, the marketing, the releasing. She's already thinking 10 steps ahead. And she says, thank you for your collaboration. I'm really proud of what we're doing. And he says he loved the, I feel the same. It's such a good feeling. So wait, does this mean that Baldoni doesn't have an iPhone and he uses an Android? Because it says loved instead of the heart over the text. And who knows? Wow. If he has an Android, I don't know what that says. But anyways, he says, I like sentimental Blake. And Blake Lively responds, never met her. And then he responds, I also like asshole Blake. Don't worry. Okay, good night, exclamation point. And then Blake Lively says, I've met her. So have my suppositories. Good night. And Justin Baldoni laughed at so have my suppositories. So it was kind of this light relationship. I mean, people are saying it's a little flirty, but I think it's just collaborative. The excitement of collaboration, right? Then it says Lively begins asserting control almost immediately beyond her contractual entitlements. For example, Lively began to insist on creative control over her character's wardrobe, which, is wild seeing what Lively came up with, what she wore. We were joking about that on Monday's episode. Ignoring the director's vision for her character and disposing of the weeks of efforts and creativity spent by the wardrobe team on shopping and carefully crafting her wardrobe, Lively sent hundreds of images to the film's costume designer, including into the late hours of the evening, depicting the style of wardrobe she wanted for her character. The costume designer had to reshop Lively's wardrobe, far exceeding the allocated budget and diverting times and resources. At one point, Lively insisted that her character had money and could afford $5,000 shoes despite being a fledgling small business owner. This forced See, this is weird too, because it was like, if it made her look like a badass, that would be one thing, but she looked, So kind of like a little bit of a ragamuffin in the film. But also I'm one for like, I love like people getting into characters and cost. Like that was part of the excitement. Like even doing like shitty theater when I was a kid, like finding like cause you read all these things about these actors and method actors and finding the right shoes and all of this stuff. So part of me geeks out about this stuff, but obviously this film had a budget. So you do have to think about that. Even if you are an executive producer, you got to think about the overall budget out of the realm of, I mean, a lot of actors do this, and especially if they're stars, this is an important part of their process. So it might sound ridiculous, but it is something that does happen apart from Blake Lively. So the wardrobe budget ballooned, they say. So Lively often refused to participate in wardrobe fittings at the production office, and they would make the wardrobe delivered to her personal residence. Loading the wardrobe department on trucks and delivering the contents to Lively's home in the middle of congested Manhattan for fittings costs time and money, always in short supply on any major film. Requests of this nature are typically made during contract negotiations. Since Lively made no such request at the time, this added expense was not included in the budget. By the way, this kind of seems the fault of Blake Lively's agents that they didn't put this into her contract. You know, if she's worried about childcare or, you know, obviously she's a mother, all of these things, which so many mothers are working mothers, I would expect her agents to take care of her in this way in terms of the contract itself. So they're saying she made him come to her place instead of going to them, and that cost more money and time, and it was a pain in the ass. In an effort to maintain harmony at the start of their working relationship and to avoid further delays caused by wardrobe conflicts, Baldoni and the studio reluctantly ceded full control to Lively over her wardrobe. This concession quickly proved regrettable. On the first day of principal photography, paparazzi captured and published photos of Lively in character wearing this hand-picked wardrobe. These images were widely reported as unflattering and sparked a backlash from Sony. Baldoni received direct criticism from Sony, who voiced serious concerns about the impact of the photos of the film's public reception. I remember these photos. Everybody did dunk on Blake Lively pretty hard and quickly because it was like, yeah, what are you wearing? I mean, you know, but I hadn't read the book, so I was like, maybe that's how the character dresses. Following these events, Baldoni approached Lively in her hair and makeup trailer where she was surrounded by her team to ask if they could speak after she was done getting her hair and makeup done. Baldoni wanted to discuss necessary wardrobe adjustments, reassert his role as director, which seems like he kind of lost focus on in terms of Blake. I do wonder, because you see him, and especially in the timeline of events, you know, having separate conversations with producers or Jamie Heath, and, you know, he's very aware that he is losing some control. And I do wonder if he feared her or he was just in admiration of her or a mixture of the two. But he had this conversation with her. And it says, while professional, it took considerable time and was later grossly misrepresented in Lively's CRD complaint, which falsely characterized the exchange as a lengthy outburst that delayed filming and caused the crew to wait for hours while Baldoni cried in Lively's dressing room. On information and belief, Lively circulated this false account to the New York Times. Listen, I do believe a world in which Baldoni cried. Like, listen, I'm trying to direct this film. What are you doing? Like, you know, I could see a world in which there were tears. You know, who knows? This conversation did not take hours, and in any length of time it took, it was not Baldoni cried for hours. He just cried for minutes. In truth, rather than take heed of the concerns of this film's distributor and director, Lively took the time to, among other things, suggest to Baldoni that he was being gaslit by Sony, Heath, and the other producer, and tried to convince him to let her continue to take the helm. So this is saying that she is now trying to convince him that these other people are, you know, like, hey, you got to be on my side, not on all these people. They're trying to gaslight you when I know the right way, right? Wild. Baldoni did briefly become emotional during the conversation, see, as we suspected, but only in response to what he believed was a genuine compliment from Lively, praising his work as a director and actor. This guy's a crier, man. I'm a crier too. But like you could, you know, like I totally, yeah, tears were involved. In hindsight, but by the way, I will say, in an artistic endeavor, you know, this kind of stuff and the release of all of these things, it doesn't necessarily encourage people to have this open creative set, which usually can prove to be really helpful for these projects. But it just makes you think you've always got to be on your game. Don't show emotion. Don't be, you know, like don't be too theater kitty, you know, like just. And he was out there being emotional, being genuine, and it was, according to this complaint, or according to this lawsuit, used against him. Lively later distorted this conversation in support of her baseless harassment allegations. alleging that Baldoni made inappropriate comments on her appearance. In reality, Baldoni, the film's director, was relaying the distributor's concerns and the widespread social media criticism regarding the wardrobe's failure to meet audience expectations. But listen, at this point, too, with social media, I mean, people are just going to hate on shit. It's now we live in a society where you have to prove people wrong. You know, before they see, hear, whatever, experience any project, they're going to rip it apart. It's always like you always have to prove your case in terms of art these days. You know, it's like, okay, wait and see the movie or wait and hear the album. You know, wait, you'll see. I remember back in the day in 1988, I was a little kid and Michael Keaton got cast as Batman. And I remember there was a fury over this. How the guy, Mr. Mom, this comedic actor, Michael Keaton, who played Beetlejuice, he's going to play Batman, the Dark Knight. Oh God, it's going to be a stupid, funny movie, not a serious Batman movie, not knowing that Tim Burton had this vision. And it turned out to be really great casting. And it really kind of blew people away that Michael Keaton was totally believable in a comic book film. But the people just bitched and moaned and bitched and how dare you cast Michael Keaton? I mean, it still happens on roll. How dare you cast this person? And then usually if the film is any good, they'll see it and be like, okay, wow, that was great. I was completely wrong. You know, it happens all the time. So when, you know, even us making fun of Blake Lively's outfit, you got to roll with those punches, unfortunately, because we like to punch as a society. Another example early in the pre-production stage, Lively sent Baldoni a long text describing how directors never permitted her to write scenes for the movies. So this was, we talked about this last week, was almost kind of like, oh, feel bad for me. I've written on my husband's movies. I've never gotten proper credit. Lively asked if she could take a pass at writing the rooftop scene in It Ends With Us, in which the characters first meet. This pivotal scene, beloved by book fans, was critical for setting the tone for the movie, so Baldoni was reluctant to allow an actor, rather than a union screenwriter, to rewrite the key scene. But Baldoni felt the need to allow Lively to rewrite the scene and agreed to take a look at what she put together. The draft of the rooftop scene dramatically differed from what had been written originally. Baldoni was hesitant about many of the changes, but thanked Lively for her passion and diplomatically told her that the scene would likely end up being somewhere between the original version and Lively's version. Seemingly stung by Baldoni's exceedingly mild resistance, not strong resistance, mild, Lively did not respond and went silent for multiple days. Later, she confirmed in text messages below that Baldoni's response, quote, "of course didn't feel great for me," or another mega celebrity friend, and Ryan Reynolds, that mega celebrity friend we are guessing is Taylor Swift. She says to have my passion praised instead of my specific contribution. Lively was referring to an earlier meeting where Lively summoned Baldoni to her New York penthouse, where Baldoni was greeted by Ryan Reynolds, who launched into enthusiastic praise for Lively's version of the scene. He's like, oh my God, I'm married to Shakespeare here. Is that William Shakespeare? My goodness, my golly. Hours later, as the meeting was ending, a famously close friend of Reynolds and Lively walked into the room and similarly began praising Lively's script. People assume this is Taylor Swift, but it also could be Sean Levy, the director of Deadpool and Wolverine. But Taylor walks in and goes, "Oh my God, that rooftop scene makes me want to write a whole new album. I could do it tonight. I'm meeting with Jack Antonoff later." Baldoni understood the subtext. He needed to comply with Lively's direction for the script. Later, Baldoni felt obliged to text Lively to say that he had liked her pages and hadn't needed Reynolds and her mega celebrity friend to pressure him. Lively responded that those two were her dragons. Lively went on to say, quote, "They also know I'm not always good at making sure I'm seen and utilized for fear of threatening egos or fear of affecting the ease of this process. They don't give a shit about that. And because of that, everyone listens to them with immense respect and enthusiasm. So I guess I have to stop worrying about people liking me." And then there's an I don't know emoji and the emphasis added. The message could not have been more clear. Baldoni was not just dealing with Lively. He was also facing Lively's, quote, dragons, two of the most influential and wealthy celebrities in the world who were not afraid to make things very difficult for him. So that obviously is Taylor Swift. So we see a copy of the text exchange about the rooftop scene. It really does help a lot, makes it so much more fun and interesting, and I would have felt that way without Ryan and Taylor. So here, Taylor's name's not redacted and called a mega celebrity friend. It's right here in the text exchange. "You really are, Blake, a talent across the board. Really excited and grateful to do this together. And then we read this last week about like, you are going to kill that rooftop scene. You know it, I'm sure, even though it was said in playful self-deprecation that we all participate in, it made me think of the process as a whole. Please know I trust that on the day you've got me, and I hope that you trust that I've got you if you want it. And then she went on to destroy him. We're in this together, and we are two of the most determined people I know, Blake writes. We also have very high bars set for ourselves. To collaborate with that type of partner is a gift that neither of us will squander, because we both care too much about the result and also the experience. I have no motives except for you to win as a director, as an actor, as a studio, as a writer. If you win, I win. If you win, our movie wins. We are aligned, and I will bring everything I have to this. As for Redacted, I think it's Taylor and Ryan and Redacted for that matter, I'm the luckiest motherfucker on the planet to have them as my dance mom level stage moms. They are embarrassingly effusive. That said, they're also my most trusted partners and the people I go to first with anything creative I touch, and I'm the person they each go to first. The reciprocal creativity and support has been one of my life's greatest and most fulfilling gifts. Oh my God, did she go to Blake with what she wore to the Grammys last night? Anyways, when they loved and signed off on the pages that she wrote for the rooftop scene, I felt good to send them to you. They asked what you thought specifically after. They checked in so many times. I mean, don't you live with Ryan Reynolds? Like, does he just roll over? Hey, has he said anything? I told them that you laughed a bunch and said it's probably a blend, but you appreciate my passion so much, which of course didn't feel great to me or them. To have my passion be praised instead of any specific contribution, or even just that you don't like the pages, which is fine also. So I think they wanted you and me to see how they felt about the work, because they've been by my side for far too many experiences where I've been overlooked. I spoke to you about this when we first met. They've watched me handwrite scripts because the director is too afraid to send the FDX file, yet he scans and has someone hand type all 120 pages of my pencil rewrites. They've watched me be hired as a writer and paid a significant fee for it, but on the condition that I never ask for credit, which I could give a shit about. It's more the principle and the dynamics at play. They've watched the other side of it too, when I'm told at signing on that I'm wanted as a true collaborator, but once we get to work, I'm really just wanted as a yes man, audience, and actor. Both Ryan and Redacted have established themselves as absolute titans as writers and storytellers outside of their primary gig, just singing or just acting, or Redacted just directing. I'm so lucky to have them as creative barometers, but also to have them as the people who prop me up and make sure I'm seen for all I can and do offer, because they know firsthand all I can contribute. They also know I'm not always as good as making sure I'm seen and utilized for fear of threatening egos or fear of affecting the ease of the process. They don't give a shit about that, and because of that, everyone listens to them with immense respect and enthusiasm. So I guess I'm going to have to stop worrying about people liking me. If you ever get around to watching Game of Thrones, you'll appreciate that I'm Khaleesi. And like her, I happen to have a few dragons, but for better or worse, but usually for better, because my dragons also protect those I fight for. So really, we all benefit from those gorgeous monsters of mine. You will too, I can promise you. Very cringy right there. But that's, so really also, it does set up a little bit of psychology for Blake, if we are to believe her, that she feels like on most projects, she is not appreciated in the way that she deserves to be. Says, I work hard. I've written all these things. I don't need credit. I'm trying to do it for the betterment of the project, but I get thrown under the bus all the time. I don't get this proper credit. So potentially she's already going into this movie thinking, oh, it's happening again, right? And so maybe the fury from the last handful of projects she has done is now being put into this project. I'm just speculating. Ugh. Khaleesi.